And welcome back, footy fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here back with another Footy Insight personal interview that I have coming to us from South Australia. The man, the myth, the legend that is Bevan Jones, the head guy of Legends with Bevo podcast, and a fun person that I've been wanting to talk with. We've had a few scheduling issues, and finally we have been able to sit down. Bevan, thank you for joining the podcast today.
Donnie, you're most welcome. Thanks for asking me to come on. I'm very honored. And yeah, you're right. It's been a bit of a challenge, hasn't it? So I'm glad we finally got there.
I'm just glad that no issues happened up. I know that life happens sometimes and podcasting just has to take a back seat, but I'm great that we were able to sit down. I know you've chatted with a good mate of mine, Craig Wessels from the Yank on the Footy, a very good friend of mine. We chat back and forth all the time. I've heard your episodes on there. I think you have a really cool story. So I thought, let's reach out to Bev. So let's jump into it. Before we get into the footy, I know this is a footy channel. This is a footy podcast. I got to ask, tell me just a little bit about yourself outside of the sport of football.
Yeah, well, at the moment, life's pretty busy in terms of I've got a 15-month-old daughter. So yeah, life's been pretty hectic with that and running around helping the wife out as much as I can. And yeah, it's certainly a game changer, but for the best as well, because she's such a cutie little Evie Jones. So yeah, loving spending time with her and seeing her grow up. And I guess at the start of it, you're basically changing nappies, and the mum's doing the breastfeeding, so you didn't get that much interaction. But now she's at that stage where I can take her for walks down to the local cafe and just play with her, and just seeing her like dance and do different things. It's really cool and really fun. So yeah, that's pretty much outside of the footy side of things. And as well as that, I just have a job at Adelaide University where I do some writing as part of that with different like athletes and different sporting clubs that are part of the university. And then, as you mentioned before, I do some stuff with the Sample with commentary. Also do some basketball commentary during the NBL One Central season. Do some writing for Hockey SA, and also emceeing for Port Adelaide and also some of the basketball clubs here in South Australia as well. So yeah, keep pretty busy, Donnie.
You are a very busy man. So the fact that I was able to corral you into the podcast is even more impressive at this point. But we are here to talk a little footy. We will kind of stay in the footy realm here. So just really, really quickly, what's your favorite part about the sport of football?
It's a really good question. I suppose it's one of those things where I've grown up, just loving the sport ever since I was a kid. And I look back at photos now, and I remember wearing the Port Magpies Guernsey with the number 7 on the back. Unfortunately, sadly passed away now, Russell Lee, but he was my idol growing up. So used to go to Magpies games and cheer on my Magpies, and still now back for Port Power, quite a passionate supporter. Got season tickets and what have you, and lucky now, as I just talked about before, to be living the dream where I actually do the aftermatch presentations for the Port Adelaide Magpies home games, which is just a dream come true. We can get to that in a moment if you like, Donnie. But yeah, I suppose just ever since I was a kid, Mum and I would go along and watch the Magpies, and Dad and my brother would be Central supporters. So we had that rivalry. It was pretty good fun. And yeah, just always loved the game. Played since I was a kid as well, and I think ended up being about 20 plus years of footy in the end I played. So I've just loved it. Just like in terms of why I love the sport, I guess it's just one of those sports that's most Aussies love footy, and it's in your, I guess it's in your veins, they say. So I just love just the fact that it's so much unpredictability with the game of footy as well. And unlike other sports like your gridirons and your rugbies, you don't see the tackles coming, and it's just a brutal sport, but I love to watch. And it's so fast as well now, the AFL. And whilst it's not quite the same as what it was in the 80s and 90s when it was much more brutal, and some people say they used to like watching it more back then. I like it now, but kind of I'm torn. Like footy now is really good, but I did used to like the big goals that players used to kick and the big hits. But then I can kind of understand with all the concussion situations we're having at the moment why people are sort of saying that it's a much safer, better game to watch now than what it was back in those days.
Yeah, definitely. And I think kind of all sports have kind of changed, unfortunately. You look at sports back in the 80s, they were absolutely brutal. So, well, I want you to go back into your memory banks a little bit. And for some people, I always love seeing the smile on their faces as they answer this. What is your earliest footy memory that you can recall?
Yeah, earliest would be definitely going down and watching the Magpies play at Alberton Oval as a little kid. And I remember my dad had some connections and stuff. I remember going into the change rooms and saying g'day to Russ Liebert and Timmy Ginniver and some of those other Port Adelaide legends, and that was just the coolest thing ever. Being in the Port Adelaide change rooms as a kid, and now as an adult, I'm getting to do that as part of my role with the Port Magpies, which is it's funny, Donny. Even though as an adult I still love it just as much as what I was as a kid, just being around that sort of that footy environment, footy atmosphere, and with the club I love.
Absolutely. And I love that. And keeping that childhood passion is absolutely fantastic. It's one of the things that I absolutely adore about the sport is because there is these 20, 30, 40 years worth of passionate following of their clubs. And it's magnificent to see. So we'll go to it. I think you kind of threw it in a little bit earlier in one of your answers. Is that you said you did play footy growing up and not everybody did. What position did you play and how far did you get? AK, how far up the ladders of footy did you get? Did you ever come close to potentially playing professionally?
Not quite, unfortunately. To be honest with you, I had a lot of people sort of say that if I could have been a better kick, I might have played at a higher level and more A grade footy. But I was one of those players where I'd get plenty of the ball, but I'd burn it a bit. So I'd be the sort of guy that would miss a goal from 10 meters out and then snag one 5 minutes later on my left from the boundary. So, and my teammates actually said that the other night. I caught up with my old teammates, and just in terms of positions, it's funny you asked that. When I was growing up, I was a little tacker, so I played generally sort of in the midfield, like as a rover or forward pocket or whatever. But then as I got older and bulked up a bit and got taller, I ended up playing centre half forward for a number of years. So I probably enjoyed playing in the midfield the most, so because that's when you're around the footy more, and playing centre half forward is a harder position on the ground, especially when you're playing like in the reserves grade and the skills aren't as good. The ball goes over your head all the time, and so it can be very frustrating to play. But just like playing the game. In terms of like at a level, I played pretty high level in amateur league. I played a Division 3 reserves level, so it's actually pretty handy. Some pretty handy players there. And then when I was living in Melbourne, I played in the A grade, or they called it seniors over there. So played a bit of A grade footy over there, and that was playing against actually played against Andy Christo one game, who's played for Carlton, and against a lot of ex-VFL players. It was pretty funny over there, Donny. That was in 2014. I lived in Melbourne for about 14 months and played for a team called the Burnside Heights Bears. And it was our first season in the seniors. Our very first game we won. It was like winning a grand final. It was just a celebration. It was just unbelievable. And then the next week we lost by 280 points.
Oh,
So
jeez.
fair turnaround. And we played against a team called Roxburgh Park in the second week, and they had like all these players, ex-VFL guys that Eddie Maguire apparently paid heaps of money for, and getting paid ridiculous money. Whereas we, being our first year in the seniors, they couldn't pay players, so certainly didn't have the same depth that they had. So it was a pretty tough season. I think we won 2 games, in that year in the seniors. And that was my only year of footy because I came back to Adelaide after that. But yeah, really enjoyed that, and that's probably the highest level I've ever played of footy. Played a fair bit of reserves grade footy as well in country with a club called the Birdwood Roosters, and managed to play one A grade game, but we're always a really strong B grade, so I didn't really get, and the A grade as well, always pretty strong. So, and again, because of my kicking, I didn't really get that opportunity. Maybe could have played a few more games in the A grade, but the A grade coaches, I guess, didn't want to give me that opportunity because they thought my disposal would let the team down a bit too much. So that's a bit of a frustrating thing, but that's all right. That's the way it goes. So
There's still good memories to look back on, even if you kind of kick yourself a little bit. But the good part is that there's so many different abilities, so many different levels and skill sets that you can get in so many different leagues. It's fantastic to
yeah,
see. I really wish sometimes sport over here had a little bit more structure, a little bit like the footy leagues over there, because if you get to a certain level, you play high school and then you're done, and then it's pickup games, it's rec league stuff, that there's intensity, but it's not really the same. So we'll jump back into it. You've thrown it in a couple of times, but I always love hearing why. Is being an SA boy, and I hear that you are a Port Adelaide supporter, if I remember correctly, and then which
yep.
means a Sandful, you are the Magpie supporter. I mean, how Was it interesting to go to Port Adelaide when the Magpies moved into the AFL, and then when it comes to it, have you ever wavered at all when it comes to your support of your club?
Not so much wavered. I mean, there's been some tough times though, particularly with the Power. Before Ken Hinkley was our coach, I remember there was 2 weeks in a row. One week we got beaten by Hawthorn by I think 150 points, and then the week after we got beaten by Collingwood by 180 or something. And there were some real dark days back in those. That was when we were getting sort of 12,000 people coming to the games at Footy Park, and that's why it kind of annoys me a bit that there's always those Ken Hinkley haters out there, and it's particularly happened on Saturday night when we lost that final to Brisbane. It's like, well, he's not the one kicking the goals, but anyway, it's a whole story for another time. Um, but like, yeah, for the job that he's done, it's just been remarkable for turning that club around. Port Adelaide was almost on its knees, like I said before, struggling for money, not getting the crowds, and there were some real dark times there. But obviously, they've turned things around now, and he's done a wonderful job in terms of getting them to finals and what have you, despite not playing in a grand final. So, yeah, there's some tough times there, and I sort of, yeah, it's sort of is an interesting one, isn't it? Whether getting rid of the old Magpies and then becoming an AFL reserve side, it's obviously divided a lot of people, and you don't get the crowds along anymore and stuff. So, but personally, though, I think the sooner they just they just get rid of the Port Adelaide Magpies and just call them Port Adelaide Power Reserves. I think because the Magpies now, in my opinion, it died back in 2014 when they decided to turn it into a AFL reserves team.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't really understand it, but that's the way it goes, I suppose. But yeah, still love my club and support them regardless of how they're going. And yeah, there has been some dark times like every club goes through. But it's nice to see them having some success now, and obviously, want to win that second flag hopefully this year or the next couple of years.
You definitely have you have a roster and some youngsters that I think are going to be very fun to watch, absolutely for sure. So let's go to a little bit more. We've kind of talked about the past a little bit. Let's go to present day, and I can't wait to talk about this because I've listened to several episodes of the podcast of the Legends with Bevo podcast. Absolutely love it. But it's not
Thank
just
you.
footy, it's a little bit of everything, which I think is really, really cool because you do kind of stretch over different things. So just how did this podcast kind of come about? Because I know, as you kind of stated earlier, that you've got so many different fingers and so many different pies. And then how is the podcast going currently? Is there anything in the works that we should be looking forward to?
Yeah, no, thanks, Donny. So probably back in around about March, April 2018, I'd just come back to Adelaide from doing a stint as a breakfast announcer up in the Riverland in regional South Australia, which I absolutely loved. And I was a bit shattered because I was really enjoying that role, but these things happen in radio. So I was doing that for 6 months, and then the extension of the contract wasn't made available. So came back to Adelaide and thought, what am I going to do next? And decided to do like an online footy tipping thing where I'd just get different people. It was actually Phil Smythe, the basketball legend here in Adelaide, that came up with the idea, and got different people on every week to have a chat about, the footy, give their tips, and then talk about their careers as well. So decided to call that again. Smythe came up with a great name of Chewing the Fat. So
Mhm.
it was called Chewing the Fat back in 2018. And at the end of the 2018 footy season, I was really enjoying it and decided I wanted to keep it going, but thought, well, there's no footy to tip on. So perhaps over summer, I'll just get different people to come on the show and, have a chat just purely about their careers and have a bit of fun with it. And here I am, close to April next year, it'll be 6 years. It's quite amazing. And 200 plus interviews I've done. And whilst there's no footy tipping aspect to it anymore, it's almost like a bit of a mini This Is Your Life, and which a lot of people are now doing. There's a lot of different podcasts out there, but I'm proud of the fact that I was one of the first real podcasters that there's so many famous people now, sports people, you name it, that have their own podcasts. There's probably a podcaster for dishwashing liquids. There's podcasts for everything. So, but it's proud. I guess I'm proud to think that I was one of the first ones that came up with a podcast, and now, yeah, like I said before, quite amazing to think I've been able to chat with all these incredible people, having never played sport at the highest level, and haven't got like a high profile personality in terms of, haven't been on Triple M or any of those big commercial radio stations as such. So it's I guess I'm quite proud, and it's kind of nice to know that I've been able to have that success just from pure hard work and some connections as well. And in terms of where it's at now. It's on community television in Melbourne on Channel 31 and also Channel 44 in Adelaide as well. So yeah, heading in the right direction, Donny. It's hard yards. Has been, especially this year with young Evie, it's been really challenging at times, and it's like, oh, I don't know if I can keep going with this. But recently I was nominated for an award. It's basically best interview program for the Antenna Awards in the end of October for basically community television around Australia. So to get nominated for that award sort of makes you feel like you're doing something right, and might as well keep going with it for now. So
Well, congratulations on that. It's absolutely fantastic. And hey, it's a labor of love. I know personally, like I said, it's not to the depth that you have a little bit, but it's one of those that you just got to do something that you enjoy, that you want to listen to, because I think then it comes off very natural, very well going. And I really get that from the podcast for sure. So any good stories? I'm always one of those. I love kind of behind the mic stories, something that you can tell, like, did an interview go haywire a little bit, something funny, or a fun little story that you can give us about the behind the mic of Legends with Bevo.
Oh, there's always bloopers. Trust me. Like even the other day, I had a girl called Jasmine Simmons on who plays footy for Port Adelaide in the AFLW, and I called her Jasmine Simmings, at the start, and then I called her coach Lauren Arnett instead of Lauren Arnell. Luckily, it was pre-recorded, but I think you've got to embrace the bloopers, because we're all human at the end of the day. You see it all the time, and I'm not sure if you get the footy over there with the Triple M footy telecast, but I love my Triple M footy, and they have this Amy Clangers thing all the time, and the commentators continuously stuff up. And the other night, Nathan Brown called Steele Sidebottom, still Seal Bottom. So like even the best make mistakes. So I think you've just got to embrace it. And there's another time, actually, I was doing a live interview. Funny you asked that. I was doing a live interview on, it was called Ticker Television. I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but they're like an online news publication. And I was talking about Legends with Bevo, and this is actually live around, or not around us, or live around the world, really, because it's online. And they were asking me about, Legends with Bevo, and I was talking about the Road to Tokyo at the time, which is a series I had going with in the lead up to the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, and it's 2021, but it was supposed to be 2020, but ended up being in 2021. But they called it, you know what I mean, though. It's got so confusing, didn't it? So, it was called the Road to Tokyo anyway. And live on the show, I can't remember what I said exactly, but I ended up sounding like I was saying I'd been an Olympian before, and which I really hadn't. So I meant to, I was talking about how having Olympians on the show and end up somehow or other incorporating it as myself being the Olympian. So you had to sort of, I'll try and send if you want to put it as part of this video, I'll try and see if I can find the link to it, mate. But that was rather funny. So.
Fantastic. That's great. And I love that. And I tell many people I've stuffed up intros in my podcast before. And I tell most people, I said, I do a one shot interview. If I stuff something up, I'm going to go with it. I'm not afraid to do that, because I think sometimes it makes the podcast that much more fun. So those are great to hear. So as you said, you've had you've had several years of this. Do you have a favorite interview, one that really sticks out in the back of your mind?
I always get asked this. It's a real tough one. I'd have to say, even though cycling's not my ultimate favorite sport, but just because he's such a legend and he's done over 50 now Tour de France's, and that's Phil Liggett, the cycling commentator, the Golden Voice. And I actually got to meet him last year. It was one of the coolest things ever. He's the nicest bloke. He was here for the Tour Down Under, and my apologies, sorry, it was earlier this year, I should say. And he was just such a lovely bloke. And to think I've chatted with him on Zoom in his lounge room in England, and then being able to chat to him in person, like that was a bit of a kid in a candy shop thing, Donny. So I'd have to say Phil would have to be the best. There's been so many incredible guests, and obviously I'm extremely grateful all of them for giving up their time. And some of them are just so incredibly busy. So I don't have a budget to be able to pay these guests. Sometimes I get them bottles of wine and what have you. And it's funny, the amount of them that just say, oh no, I don't want anything, I'm just happy to help. That's just goes to show there's a lot of nice people out there, isn't there? So that's probably very tough one to answer, but I'd say Phil, and I could list so many more that have been just incredible guests.
Fantastic. As you said, you haven't had that white whale type of person before, but have you ever had somebody that's kind of caught you off guard that has maybe made you a little bit starstruck?
Oh, starstruck. Yeah, well, earlier this year I had Wyman Treadray in the studio, and being a big Port Adelaide supporter, and he was my favourite player, back in the day when he was playing for the Power. And yeah, probably interviewing Treaders, I reckon, just because he's also an imposing man, big unit, and very popular in SA in terms of the media. Like, he's had a very successful media career. Well, obviously there's been a bit of controversy. Won't get into that. But with it, the whole situation I'm talking about. Yeah.
Again, I cover when I with me covering the AFL, I heard all about the unintendable comment that I
Yes.
think for many people in South Australia, especially on the teal side of South Australia, that Treaders will probably never live that one down a little bit, especially considering they went on what a 13-game win streak right after that comment. So
I
it
know that
is
was amazing, wasn't it? It was
it
just
was
so
it was it
uncanny.
was
Yeah.
and my favorite part about it is he took it very well. Like he didn't get angry about it, and you could definitely tell some people tried to take the Mickey out of him a little bit after he said it. But it was definitely an interesting little moment there when you were like, okay, when are they gonna lose? Because Treadway's looking even worse with each win.
I know. Yeah, that's exactly right. But no, he's a really good guy, and we spoke for nearly an hour. And the fact he gave up his time was just so nice of him. Yes, I'd have to say, there's been so many that have just been, yeah, been starstruck and amazed that I've been able to chat with them based on how successful their careers have been. And like I said before, I'm not a high profile person myself, many means. So, but yeah, I'd say Traders would be probably one that left me starstruck a bit.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to have fun with this. As I've heard this called as the white whale. Who's your dream interview? Let's stay in footy just to kind of go on the podcast here. Who's your dream interview? Who's the one person, no matter how famous, you'd love to have on Legends of Bevo to talk footy?
Talk footy. I was gonna say like someone that wasn't footy related. Michael Jordan or Usain Bolt would be pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and especially from a non-sport perspective, Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, that would
Mm-hmm.
be incredible. But in terms of footy perspective, oh, there's so many. Probably my favorite player of all time. I don't think he does any interviews or anything like that. Would be Gary Ablett Senior.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, or Wayne Carey. But again, yeah, they're sort of like they don't really do much in the way of media. Those two guys these days. So uh, yeah, particularly Wayne. He's with his situation, he's not involved in the media anymore at the moment. So I think he's got his own podcast, Wayne. But yeah, no, Wayne Carey or Gary Ablett Senior would be amazing. They're definitely two of the greatest players of all time. Maybe Lee Matthews as well would be pretty cool to chat with.
Yep.
Yeah,
Those,
but
those would be
again,
those would be fun ones for sure. Those would be fun ones for sure. Absolutely.
yeah,
I
it's
I would
hard
I
to.
would definitely love to listen to Lee Matthews. If I could somehow
Yeah.
pull a Lee Matthews on this podcast, I think I'd probably sit there going, please talk to me for 2 hours, because just the knowledge and the years of experience that he'd had, that would be fantastic. So I would definitely, if that ever happens, sir, please let me know, because I would definitely want to tune in for that one. So we will go to it again. I have this year started, as I kind of said off mic, I started covering the state leagues this year, and had the absolute pleasure of watching Sanfil and Sanfil W this year, and had the pleasure of listening to your wonderful calls this year. So I gotta ask, what got you
Oh,
into
thank you very
commentating?
much.
Because as you said, you're a super busy guy. What got you into commentating the Sanfil?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a commentator, and just a few years ago, there was an opportunity to put your name down to commentate in the sample. And well, let's go back before that. I was actually doing some commentary and also boundary writing, and it's quite sad now that you don't get to do that anymore, because the radio station, it still exists, but they're not involved with the sample coverage. It's a bit of a long story, Donny, with that one. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's a bit of a sour point, because I was actually involved with the 1079 live football coverage. And that was amazing. It gives so many people opportunities. And I was able to interview players on the ground for the finals. One of the coolest things ever was like, it was sad in a way because Port lost the grand final, but being on the Adelaide Oval when Glenelg and Port had just played this most amazing game, and then obviously 40 plus 1,000 people there on the Adelaide Oval, and be on interview Glenelg players after the game. And then the year before that, North played that epic grand final as well, and interview players on the ground from North Adelaide. So yeah, getting to do that for 107.9 Life, and then be able to commentate some games as well. Unfortunately, yeah, like I said before, they don't cover the footy anymore. They're not allowed to, because other radio stations have taken over, which I think is a bit unfair, but that's just the way the landscape works. And yeah, so it means that I'm not really involved, in the finals in terms of from the league perspective. I called an under-18s game last week, which was good fun, a final. But yeah, so in terms of your question about how I got involved, it was just found out about it, and because there wasn't that 107.9 Life opportunity anymore, and I wanted to stay involved, I thought, yeah, well, let's put my name down and do some commentary. So yeah, I've been lucky enough to call some SANFL reserves games, SANFL W and under 18s as well. So hopefully next year maybe some league again, but it's really competitive. There's lots of callers, and there's only a certain amount of games you can call. So yeah.
Yeah, well, but it's good though, because you get that opportunity to see if it's something like, would this be something you would possibly think about continuing, or are you enjoying what you're doing, kind of using this ability to be able to call many different things, or kind of, as you said,
Yeah.
stretch yourself to do tons of things?
Well, in an ideal world, I'd love to call AFL, but there's just
Mhm.
such a lack of opportunities here in SA. So I'd probably have to go like interstate or something like that if I was to, go and work maybe in Brisbane or like New South Wales, where it's not such a non-dominant AFL landscape. There might be more opportunities there. But yeah, Adelaide, it's really tough. So I'm not sure about next year whether I'll keep going with it, because yeah, it's hard work, and yeah, like you said before, you sort of got to prioritize your tasks, don't you, when you have a young child and you have other things on. So
Yeah, I completely understand it, but it was fun. It was fun to hear you, because like I said, I found the podcast. I was like, whoa, as I was listening to one of the Sample W games, I was like, whoa, isn't that Bevan? And I like had to double check it, and it was really cool. And then I
oh,
went
thank
back to
you.
the start of the game, was like, oh, that is Bevan calling it. So it was a really cool kind of aha moment there for sure. So we will jump to it. We had discussed this also off mic before we got started, is you have secured tickets for the semifinal game between GWS and Port. So we will go to the AFL here. Your thoughts on this AFL season, because this year Adelaide had a lot of awesome things happen, because you had Gather Round this year in Adelaide, and both teams, for the most part, for most of the year, were in the opportunity to make finals. Adelaide fell a little bit short. We won't discuss that, because everybody knows what team I barrack for and how those two combine. But as you said, Port Adelaide and the Warren Treadway thing, Port Adelaide make the finals. They'll be in the semifinal against GWS. Your thoughts so this far on this AFL season? Because this has been crazy good season of footy.
Yeah, it's been one for the ages, hasn't it? And yeah, like you mentioned before about the starts of the year for Port Adelaide, it wasn't the best. And then there was talks about where Port was at when they lost that showdown, and they came out and won 13 in a row, which is just remarkable. And obviously snuck a couple of those, the Essendon goal after the siren for Dan Houston, and obviously the one that was, sorry to bring this one back, but the one that didn't quite make the distance with Florent
Mm-hmm.
kicking the goal after the siren at the SCG. So yeah, there was a couple of games where Port could have easily have lost, and when they won that 13 in a row, but they were good enough to do it. And then obviously, made the finals, and probably in the end shot themselves in the foot a little bit by losing games like the second showdown and other ones where or not winning games by enough in terms of percentage, and then they ended up finishing third and had to take on the Lions last Saturday night. And yeah, I don't know, it was always going to be a tough one. The Lions not losing at all at the Gabba all year, and I think there was a stat the other night saying their record was 51-8 or something like that at the Gabba in recent years, which is just unbelievable, isn't it? It's like a Cats type record at Kinnear Park. So, but the season itself, Donny, yeah, it's been remarkable. And the thing I love about the season, I mean, obviously you've had West Coast and the Roos and the Hawks that have struggled at times, but even so, there's still games where West Coast have come out and produced really good performances against St Kilda over there in WA. They were right in the game until the last quarter, and we know Saints played finals. So, and the Roos came out and played some really good footy towards the end of the year and could have won, a couple more games. And the Hawks, well, they were super impressive, obviously knocking off Collingwood and then beating Brisbane as well. Like they played some super exciting footy. And these are like the bottom place sides, but then you had other sides as well during the year that had Freo beating Geelong down there at Kinnear Park, which was remarkable. And the Giants obviously beating the Blues to play finals. And there were so many great games during the year and that went right down to the wire. And yeah, I think it was probably one of the best seasons I've ever seen of the AFL. And I don't know about you, but I think it's in a really good position at the moment with how even the competition is. Yes, the Hawks, Roos, and Eagles have got a little bit of a way to go to get to some of those top sides, but it's still, give them a couple of years and they'll be back up there again. And it's just an even really exciting, even competition at the moment. And it's only going to get more and more tight over the years, and which I think the AFL will just be absolutely loving that. So you sort of feel the same?
Yeah, I definitely for sure. This year has been absolutely just mental with some of the things that have happened. And yes, you have the discussion points of North and West Coast being as atrocious as they were at times, but I kind of loved at the end of the year that they kind of told the media get stuffed because they were winning games because everybody was talking about Harley Reid and all this. But I loved it, like legitimately loved that they went out to try to win footy games because in the long run, those gentlemen donning those Guernseys in those locker rooms don't give two flying stuffs about Harley Reid. They don't. They want to win games of
Exactly.
footy. They want to play better. I'm kind of tired of it. And I really, maybe being over here in America, I really get sick of it too, because this constantly happens all the times. We got to make sure that we get the number one overall pick because this kid is going to beat. And I'm just like, no, I'd rather you win a game,
Yeah,
win whatever sport you're playing. Don't try to lose.
I couldn't agree with you
It
more.
goes against everything an athlete has in it. So that's the most frustrating thing I've ever had. So this has been an amazing season. Again, my Swans are over, but I'm going to be glued to the television in my iPad on this. I cannot wait for it. It is going to be fantastic. Okay. So as we said a little bit earlier, I have not been to Australia. It is on my bucket list. So I'm doing a little bit of research for when I go. When I get over there, I make sure that I enjoy my footy going experience. So I want you to put your fan hat on really quickly. What is your favorite food that you have to get when you go to the footy?
You got to say, I reckon a pie with sauce and hot chips, Donny.
Those would be the two most popular ones for sure.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely those are the two most popular ones for sure, and some interesting ones for that. Stay warm in the winter conditions that is the footy season. And then my other favorite is, where is the go-to place to sit? Where should I sit to be sure I get the best footy experience?
Yes, that's actually a really good question because it depends whether you want to be, right amongst it in the atmosphere. Because I sit with the Port Adelaide cheer squad in the regular season, which is behind the goals, and whilst you can't see the other end as well, especially on sunny days, it's a bit hard to see the screen and stuff. The atmosphere is just electric, and especially when it's like a close game, like there's been a few this year, and it's just super exciting. So yeah, I'd say depending on whether you want to sit right amongst it, be with the cheer squad, or if you want to sort of sit up in the nosebleeds, which you get still a pretty good view of the ground as well when you're really high up. Or, but in terms of like the best place to see the game, I'd probably say like on a wing, like in the members stand, or one of those other stands, like right in the middle of the ground, is always really good as well. But again, it just depends on where you'd like to see the game from.
Yeah, definitely. One of the most popular places has been that second level on the wing has been one of the most popular spots, and
Yes, I
because
can
you can
agree.
kind of see the entire game. You don't have to worry about the one thing about the ground level that I hear from most is that if it goes all the way to the other side of the field, sometimes, especially if you're behind the goals, it gets a little difficult to keep track of what's happening. So I've heard that answer very popular. And then the last question that I always ask, and I am compiling a list of games to sit down and watch because some of these are absolute crackers. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen live on the television, doesn't matter. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen.
I'll give you two.
Sure.
Actually, three. So Port Adelaide's 2004 grand final, because obviously, winning the first ever AFL grand final was amazing. I went to a game back in the day where Essendon was behind by 10 goals. You might remember it as one of the best games of all time. And I was actually lucky enough to be there at the MCG. And Essendon was down by about 10 goals in the second quarter and came back to beat the Roos. and made Lloyd kicks about 10 goals. And it was just one of the most amazing games of footy you could ever wish to see. It had everything. So that was just being there was just next level. And then to see that comeback as well was just totally blew me away. And then I think that was in about 2001, that game. And then to watch in terms of a pure spectacle was 1989 when Geelong lost to the Hawks and Gary Ablett kicked 9 goals, won the Norm Smith medal. That was just such a brutal game of footy, but so good to watch. And I've watched it back again so many times because I just love, it's just awesome to watch. So much happening, so many big hits, that you don't see these days. And like we talked about, probably with the whole concussion situation, is probably a good thing because back in, it was just so many people get injured. And, now we know what's the situation's like with all these past players of their concussion problems. So, but yeah, Donnie, that was just remarkable to watch. If you haven't already done it, watch the 1989 grand final. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, I've watched the 1989 grand final with a triple M call of it, which is absolutely hilarious because Billy Brownless is playing in the game and also calling it, which makes it even more comical because every time he stuffs
Oh,
something up,
they take the
if I
piss.
remember, it was Brian Taylor, oh shoot, James Brayshaw. I think the Duck was calling it, or I think the Duck was on the call too. And they just absolutely take the Mickey out of him during one part where I think he
Oh,
bunny chopped somebody, and they were just absolutely giving it to him. It was
I reckon I heard that as
hilarious.
well. It was absolutely gold. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely hilarious. I love that call. I think I even found it on Twitter at one time and sent it to a few friends. I said, if you want to give yourself a nice belly laugh while watching a really good game of footy, listen to this call by Triple M. Is absolute gold. So, Bevan, that is going to do it for my questions. This has been a fantastic chat. I know like I said, we went back and forth trying to make sure we did this. And I'm super, super happy that we were able to find a common time and sit down and have a chat. This has been fantastic. Before we get out of here, really quickly, let everybody know how to get a hold of Legends with Bevo, where we can find it on our podcasting ways, and what's kind of your next episode coming up.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Donnie. So the next episode that will be coming out will be the one that I had the other day with Jasmine Simmons, the Port Adelaide AFLW player. That was a really good one. So looking forward to that. And then in terms of where you can get it, so I'm on community television in Melbourne, 9:30 every Tuesday night, and also repeated a couple of times during the weekend, and in Adelaide on Monday nights at 8 p.m. on Channel 44, and then Saturday nights at 8:30 Channel 44. So they're both, community channels, which it's just amazing that they're sort of given the opportunity to promote Legends of Bevo and had some really great feedback from that, which is great. And it's always funny when you get people that are watching and send you a message like your mates, like, "Oh, I just saw you on TV." So that's kind of cool.
That's
And then
awesome.
also get us all the usual social media platforms as well, like your YouTube, your Facebook, Instagram, even on TikTok now, and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. So. And we've got a website even as well, Donnie. So just look up Legends of Bevo website too. So that's pretty much all.
Fantastic, fantastic, Bevan. I truly, truly appreciate you being on the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for the end of our episode. Again, keep track of it. More AFLW, AFL finals coverage. And as per usual, we will cover the grand finals of each, the VFL, the Sandful, and the Waffle to see who will be holding up premierships at the end of those grueling seasons. Cannot wait for it. That'll do it for it. Please check back again for another episode of Donnie's Disposal, and we will see you again very, very soon.